Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 1991's ActRaiser, a game where you play as a god who has come to free the world from the control of evil beasts, featuring a mix of action platforming and city-building mechanics.
Following that is the amplification of one of the most accessible games on Earth, with audio-visual euphoria, 2018's Tetris Effect. A tough theme this week. Very different games indeed. But I think, if anything, it's all about tapping into that higher power. Whether it's your godliness yourself, or reaching that flow state, in a sense of connecting with a higher being through synesthesia. It's something. It's possible there, right?
I mean, I see where you're coming from. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down.
It should be an interesting conversation of two games this week. Both fantastic soundtracks, a little tough in the research department for different reasons, but we'll get to that there. One very well-known composer and one that's not so well-known. But before we get into that, let's quickly catch up with some of the composer follow-up headlines. I mean, obviously all these composers have been doing great things since we talked about them on our show, and it's the new year, new weeks, new projects, new things popping up. First of all, we had a Super Smash Bros. Direct, and despite anyone being sore about Byleth joining the fight, one of the bigger announcements was that Cuphead is a Mii costume, a Mii fighter costume. And he, like Sans, and Toby Fox got Megalovania into Smash, Christopher Madigan got Floral Fury from Cuphead into Super Smash Bros. And that's so cool. That's out on January 28th. Get excited for that one.
I'm super happy that it's the indies that are getting the songs to come with Mii's, and I imagine that might change later in future updates. But, at the end of the day, Undertale and Cuphead, those are the only two Mii costumes that have come with a song. Granted, I don't personally think Floral Fury would have been the song that I would have picked, but it's still a pretty good song.
I mean, it was on our Critical 5.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, even before that, there was a Pokemon Direct, where Junichi Masuda did the presenting, and Go Ichinose retweeted the tweet and all that. It ended up being for the expansion pass, is what they announced. It is adding two areas to Pokemon Sword and Shield, being the Crown Tundra and the Isle of Armor. It's bringing in 200 of the old Pokemon, I believe, and then introducing more story, more legendary Pokemon, and of course, the part that's relevant to this show, more music.
Yeah, I don't know if we know necessarily if it's Go Ichinose doing the music, but a retweet could suggest that. But yes, also we talked about Junichi Masuda on the show, and it's just always interesting seeing him play that role of Pokemon series director. Just very interesting.
Yeah.
On the Supergiant Games side, with their anniversary continuing from the 10-year and all that, they continue to have concerts with music from Bastion, from Transistor, from Pyre, and the upcoming Hades. And so Darren Corbin and Ashley Barrett announced that they're putting on another Supergiant Games music concert. This is in London, though, so if we have any UK listeners and you're interested in checking that out, that's January 23rd at 8:30 p.m. at 229 in London. I'm guessing that's a concert house, a concert hall, some sort of venue. But anyway, if you're interested in Supergiant Games music and you're in the UK, that's coming up soon.
I'm not in the UK, but I will be at PAX in a month. Think you guys could do one there?
I'm sure they should.
I mean, I would go. I would happily go to that concert. I don't care what. I will skip out on all of my obligations to go to that concert. And by that I mean I would make sure I don't have any obligations during that time slot. And also, lastly, 30 minutes of new Doom Eternal music has been released, of course, coming from Mick Gordon.
He's killing it. It sounds fantastic. Put that Doom machine to work, that Doom instrument.
Yeah. And that's really it for composer news, which that's the most we've had in a while, because the last few have been like, well, we're recording these 2 weeks in advance, so there's no news we can talk about.
When the new year starts, news headlines start to propagate.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to hearing more, seeing what these composers do in the coming 2020. But we're living in the now, not in the future. And in the now, I'm here to talk about our first game being ActRaiser. Before I get started, do want to apologize. I have been sick for the past 3 days.
Oh.
So if my voice sounds kind of, especially near the end, that's why. But I will push through for you, because we're here to talk about ActRaiser, and ActRaiser is a super cool game that was originally released for the Super Famicom on December 16th, 1990. A North American release for the Super Nintendo would follow in November of 1991, with a European release not happening until March of 1993. 3 years after the Japanese release. Man, what an era. There might be some people listening that don't remember this, but for a long time, Europe just sort of got games super late. All the time. For seemingly no reason. And that isn't really a thing anymore. It took them forever to get Animal Crossing City Folk, didn't it? If I remember correctly, that was the big one that I remember.
I mean, just many of the games. Yeah, City Folk was probably one of them. I think, the Wii era was kind of the last times when there was the big disparity.
Mm-hmm. So that accounts for why that would have taken so long. It is a game developed by Quintet and was published by Enix, this of course being before they merged with Squaresoft to become the company we know today as Square Enix. In ActRaiser, you take the reins of a deity known as the Master, who hundreds of years prior to the game's start was defeated by the evil Tanzra and his lieutenants. And he awakens those many hundreds of years later from a long slumber to find that the land has been divided into 6 lands. And his powers have disappeared because the people of the world no longer believe in him. So the goal of the game becomes to free the world from Tanzra's evil clutches and rebuild the world into one where humans can live happy and free of suffering. So ActRaiser, from a gameplay perspective, is split between 2 distinct gameplay styles. The first is an action sequence, as it is called in the game, which is your average action platformer. You take control of a warrior statue brought to life by the Master, and you make your way through your usual obstacle course that you would get in a game like this. Granted, this is the weaker part of the game, in my opinion, because the platforming is a little bit clunky, and your character is a little bit stiff, which I guess makes sense since you're playing as an animated statue. But, I mean, it's alright, I guess. You can jump, you can slash your sword, you can perform various magic spells. The one that pops into mind for me is you shoot a double fireball thing. That saved me a lot, if I remember correctly. But once you have completed your first platforming section, the game then becomes a city builder. So basically, each land has 2 action sequences, and then the simulation sequence, which is what it calls the city building section. And in the city building section, you take control of a little cherub servant of the Master, who directs the people on how to rebuild their crumbling cities, while also protecting them from flying monsters that emerge from nearby monster lairs. The player can also use various miracles, such as earthquakes or wind, or hitting something with lightning. This can accomplish certain goals. The one that comes to mind for me was actually a secret that I had to look up, admittedly, but There's one point where you can go to this land and you strike the temple with lightning. And then suddenly the people like go into the temple and go, we found this jewel and we didn't give it to you because we thought it was really cool. And look, we're sorry. Here, please take it. And it gives you extra HP. And speaking of HP, this whole thing is how you get extra HP and SP. As the population of the world increases and their belief and love of the master increases, his health and power also increases. So once you've completed a town simulation sequence, you are once again thrust into another action sequence where you have to fight one of Tanzer's lieutenants. And once they have been defeated, the land is freed from Tanzer's grasp. Of course, you also have to beat Tanzer himself, but you know, you get what I mean. And with that, this is where I ask, what are your experiences with ActRaiser?
So I've never played it. I knew that it was this kind of these two kind of disparate genres kind of mashed together in a way, and I've seen some gameplay footage, so I'm at least kind of familiar as a whole. But I think it's the soundtrack overall that I'm more familiar with, whether it's certain famous songs or songs that it's like, I've heard this in plenty of other places before, and I did not know it came from this. Or I think just, being around you and your different projects. I know you've used a couple of these songs in different places before as well. So a great soundtrack, but not one I've played at all.
So for me, when I was a kid, we were thinking of buying a Wii. And what do you do when you're a kid and you have access to the internet and you're thinking of buying a Wii? You go onto the Virtual Console webpage and you start making a handwritten list of every game you want to buy. and that is where I first learned of ActRaiser, where I played the preview video that came with it, and heard one of the songs on our critical track and immediately thought, this sounds awesome. I need to play it right now. And then didn't play it until like 2013, if not 2014. And it's good. I can't say I'd ever be in a rush to go replay it, but it's good, I guess, is the only way that I can really accurately say it. But yeah, I think that this is probably the best example of like hearing a song and thinking, oh, I need to play this though. It was probably at least my first experience with that at the very least.
Like, I'll throw out a tease right now. This song that you're referring to, and one of our critical five, one of your critical five, rather. If I had to put together a list of 5 for this soundtrack, there is a song that's like, it's one of the best 16-bit songs ever made. Like, just gonna throw that tease out there. You want to stick around to hear that one.
I would agree with that. So, in terms of actual, like, research into the game and its actual development, there's actually very little to be found, which is shocking, but not that shocking, just more so disappointing. And there seems to be a very good reason for why there's not a lot of information about this game on the internet. So, first of all, did you know that this entire game is a thinly veiled allegory for Christian monotheism, and it's spread across the world?
I mean, it makes sense.
In fact, a ton of this game actually got changed when it was brought overseas, largely due to Nintendo of America's strict policies against religious imagery in their games. Reminder, these policies were so strict that, if you'll remember, during the Earthbound episode, I brought up that they had to take out the red crosses on the hospital signs because those counted. Even though those have nothing to do with religion and are basically the universal symbol for this is a hospital, they still had to go. It was a weird time. Other changes that were made. In the simulation sequences, monster layers in the North American and European releases are marked by little skull icons, but in the Japanese version, they're the Star of David.
Oh, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah, this was also changed. And that one, I think I get.
I feel like the skull is a little better represented then.
Little bit. Level design was apparently also changed, though. The North American release was changed to make it easier than the Japanese release, which was also like a thing that used to happen a lot back in this time period. Japan seemed to have this idea of like, oh yeah, no, Americans suck at games. They can't do it. So we gotta make them easier for them.
Super Mario Brothers 2, baby.
Yeah, pretty much. They tweaked how much MP spells cost to cast. They upped the amount of time the player had to complete the action sequences. And they even made it so that spike pits were no longer an instant death.
I mean, that kind of sounds like changes right up my alley, actually.
Yeah, a little bit. Oddly, though, certain values were apparently tweaked to specifically make the simulation sequences harder. I couldn't find any details on what was changed to make them harder, but I find it really funny that they looked at the platforming and said, this is too hard. Americans will never get this. And they looked at the city building and said, this isn't hard enough. Make it more. Upon beating the North American version, you can unlock Professional. That is with an exclamation point. That is part of the name.
Huh.
I love it. So you can unlock Professional mode, which was basically a hard mode that reverted the level design back to the original Japanese. Mostly. I, again, couldn't find details on what stayed the same. This mode actually cuts out the simulation sequences entirely. So you don't do them at all. You just do all the platforming. The European version got all of those changes, but then got even more changes. Professional mode was renamed to Action mode, and it was also made available from the start of the game. So you no longer had to beat the game to unlock this harder mode, and it also added a beginner difficulty alongside the already present normal and expert. Expert was also made even harder by increasing how much damage enemies did and decreasing how much damage you did.
Which is always just garbage when it comes to fabricating difficulty.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that method, to be perfectly honest. So, reportedly, ActRaiser sold around 620,000 copies worldwide, and it remains talked about by a good chunk of people today. It won EGM's Best Music Award in 1993, well deserved. GameSpot includes it among their best games of all time list, and when Nintendo Power did their top 200 games list, it ranked number 150. A sequel, ActRaiser 2, was released in October of 1993, October 29th specifically. The simulation sequences aren't in this game at all. It is entirely a platformer, which is the main reason I haven't played it, because I kind of liked the simulation sequences. They were actually my favorite part of the game. And so, like, hearing about the sequel and then hearing it said, like, oh yeah, those aren't there, just, I don't know, kind of kills my desire to go play it. ActRaiser saw a very limited mobile release in 2004, though it only consisted of the first 3 action sequences with no simulation sequences. So the people that keep releasing these games have a real vendetta against the simulation sequences, I guess. So I guess I'm alone in what I prefer.
But it's like the unique thing about the game.
Yeah, I genuinely don't understand. And then it finally saw a release on the Wii U Virtual Console in 2007, but this appears to be the last official release the game has ever seen. It never hit the Wii U Virtual Console, and it has yet to be added to the Switch's library of SNES games.
But, you know, it would be a good one when they do decide to add some more.
Yeah, I have a feeling I know why, though, which is Quintet, who would continue to make games like Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma, just to list some of the ones that I recognize the names of, would keep making games. And in fact, they helped with development of the first Shenmue, but they kind of just seem like they quietly died in 2002. like without even an official announcement, there was a bulletin board, and people were starting to get mad that there were no like updates on some of the games they were reportedly working on, and were asking like, what's up? What is happening? And the last post on the bulletin board basically said, we don't have anything to say, so we're going to go ahead and close this bulletin board. And then their website just disappeared in 2008. So Quintet just appears to be gone. Nobody quite knows for sure why or if they are actually gone.
That is really sad. But I think some people at least try to still make ActRaiser like games. I mean, there was that game last year? Was it Soul Seraph or something like that?
Yeah, that was a Sega published game, I think.
Something like that. Yeah, not a good game apparently, but I think one that took quite a lot of inspiration from ActRaiser.
Mm-hmm. The ActRaiser license itself is actually currently owned by Square Enix. So it's still out there. Somebody does own it. And I imagine that's why it's not on the SNES games for Nintendo Switch. Because are any Square games on there yet? Square kind of feels like the kind of company that would rather sell them themselves separately.
But, on SNES Classic, there is Final Fantasy 3, so...
But yeah, so maybe one day we'll see another ActRaiser game. Probably not, though. If we haven't seen one since 93, we're not seeing another one anytime soon. But the music for ActRaiser is one of the things it is most well known for, and that music was done by the legendary Yuzo Koshiro. Koshiro was born on December 12th, 1967 in Hino, Tokyo, Japan. His mother was a pianist, so she taught him how to play the piano when he turned 3, and apparently by age 5, he was just really, really good at it. And then he started taking music lessons in 1975. From Joe Hisaishi.
Whoa.
And this would have been pre-Nausicaa, so Hisaishi wasn't even a big-name film composer yet. His Wikipedia article just casually mentions, oh yeah, and he studied under Joe Hisaishi for 3 years. It's like,
what a small world. Worlds collide.
Yeah, I did not expect to read that name while starting this research. Supposedly everything after he stopped studying under Hisaishi was completely self-taught. Including being able to use a synthesizer and compose music in general. Because in the early 80s, Koshiro began to compose music on a PC, specifically an NEC PC 8801. I don't know what that means, but it is kind of important that you know the model. Not only was he making his own music, but he was also creating mock-ups based on the music in arcade games that he enjoyed. And according to him, the games that directly inspired him to want to write music for video games were Namco's Tower of Druaga, Sega's Space Harrier, and Konami's Gradius. So, he got his first composing job in 1986 at Nihon Falcom. He was 18 years old at the time, so try and compartmentalize that. And apparently they used music from a demo tape that he had sent them in Scenario 2 of their PC RPG Xanadu, which was part of the Dragon Slayer series. This is not a series that I am familiar with. I've never heard of it, and I don't know what Scenario 2 means. But again, I'm just giving you the information I found. He'd continue working with Falcom until 1988, and would actually end his career there by scoring the first 2 games in the Ys series, which I believe is still going today.
Yeah.
Ys is a relatively big name. Not big name, but it's well known among RPG fans.
And if you say that it's wise, because it's capital Y, lowercase s, we're going to have words.
I only know it's Ys because Ben plays Ys.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason I know. So after leaving Falcom, Koshiro became a freelancer. And during this time, he did a lot of work for Sega. And this is actually the era in which he would have scored ActRaiser and its sequel for Quintet. But in 1990, near the end, he helped found a company called Ancient Corp, which was a game dev assistant company. Basically, the way it was described in the Wikipedia article was it was a company that solely existed to help other game developers with development. They didn't make their own games, but they contracted help with other studios, which is not really a type of company I guess there are a lot of companies nowadays that you'd call like guns for hire, like Platinum does that a lot. But like Platinum also makes their own games. So this is a bit of a weird concept for me. He helped found this company alongside his mother, Tomo Koshiro, and his sister Ayano Koshiro was employed at this company as an artist and character designer, which, fun fact connected to that, his sister is actually probably how he ended up involved in ActRaiser, because she was the lead art designer on ActRaiser. And in fact, apparently she has done art for several of the games that he has worked on. So that's kind of cool. While at Ancient, Koshiro did some weird things, including composing and arranging music for an 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog to be put on the Sega Game Gear, which I completely forgot the Game Gear existed until doing this research, and really, could you blame me? And then he also began scoring games in the Streets of Rage series during this time, which is actually probably what he's best known for today, are his Streets of Rage soundtracks. Another fun fact connected to that, he apparently scored all 3 of the original Streets of Rage games on the same PC that he started composing on as a child. Even though by that time, those computers were horribly outdated technology. And apparently, he's used it more recently too, because he used that same type of PC to compose for a game in 2007, Etrian Odyssey.
Oh, wow.
His soundtrack for Streets of Rage 2 was apparently considered especially revolutionary because many people felt like it was music that would actually fit in a real-life nightclub, which was his goal. In 1994, for his score of Streets of Rage 3, he created a composition method that he called the Automated Composing System. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know if it means it was a piece of software or like just... I honestly have no idea what that means. Nothing could really help me. But apparently, whatever it was, it allowed him to make music in the jungle genre, which is a new one for me. Apparently what it is it's a form of electronic music that is generally known for its extremely fast-paced beats. And apparently this method has become popular among techno and trance musicians, though when he first came out with it, apparently it was not popular. And it is now seen as something that was ahead of its time. And, of course, his favorite genres of music are apparently new wave, dance, technopop, classical, and hard rock. And his favorite Western bands are Van Halen and Soul to Soul. So let's talk about his discography, because he has done a lot. He has obviously been in this industry for a very long time. Obviously, I already mentioned he did Ys 1 and 2. He did Streets of Rage 1, 2, and 3, and he also is returning for the upcoming Streets of Rage 4. Obviously, he did ActRaiser and ActRaiser 2. He did the soundtrack for Super Adventure Island, the Sega CD version of Eye of the Beholder, the game Cold Sept, which I only know the name of because there's a song from Smash in it, I think. Or a song in Smash from it. Yeah. Shenmue and Shenmue 2. He was the lead composer for Shenmue, and I believe he was just a contributor for Shenmue 2. Namco X Capcom. He did the soundtrack of Castlevania Portrait of Ruin alongside Michiru Yamane. He is the main composer for the entire Etrian Odyssey series. He's done all of them, including a song for Persona Q, which was the Persona spinoff of Etrian Odyssey. He wrote the song Disturbances, the one called From Beyond.
And when we talk about that game, we're going to bring that song up in some capacity.
He obviously, we've talked about his work before in Kid Icarus Uprising. He was one of the composers for Layton Brothers' Mystery Room, the mobile game that followed Layton's Son, that a lot of people don't like, apparently. He composed the main theme of Project Cross Zone 2, did the soundtrack for Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. He did the main theme to Soul Seraph, which we talked about earlier, was an attempt at making a spiritual successor to ActRaiser. And he apparently, most recently, did the menu music for the Sega Genesis Mini. And he also did music for the Super Smash Bros. Series. He has been involved in the remixing of tracks for those games since Brawl. In Brawl, he did a remix of the main theme from The Legend of Zelda, as well as Norfair from Metroid. In 3DS and Wii U, he did another remix of the main theme from Legend of Zelda, as well as a remix of the Trainer Battle theme from Pokemon X and Y. He remixed Wrath of the Reset Bomb from Kid Icarus Uprising, and the Pac-Man theme. And then in Ultimate, he did a remix of Now or Never from Splatoon, Guile Stage from Street Fighter 2, and then the Psycho Soldier theme and Psycho Soldier theme Overseas Edition from the game Psycho Soldier that was brought in with the Terry Bogard update. So he's done a lot. A lot of music from this man.
Yeah, and so when we've mentioned him on past episodes, like with Kid Icarus Uprising, it's always been like, oh, we'll get to Yuzo Koshiro. And here we are.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of actual development of the soundtrack, I couldn't find anything, but there are a couple of tidbits that I did feel needed mentioning. First of all, for many in the industry, this game is actually seen as the biggest example and the first example of how much more the SNES could do than its predecessors when it came to sound. This was a huge blow people away moment in terms of music. And the soundtrack was officially released in January of 1991, and then in September of 1991, a Symphonic Suite album was also released, and it's super good. I've heard it. It's great. It would be my remix if I wasn't so committed to finding a fan remix. So let's get in to those 5 critical tracks. Of course, there's no other song that we could possibly start with outside of Fillmore. This song rules. It's so good.
Yeah, this is the great one.
Oh, yeah.
The GOAT. Just the coolest 16-bit song I think ever. It's just it really catches your ears and gets you going.
It is one of the first songs you hear in the game. It is the song for the very first action sequence in the game, that being the first one for the land of Fillmore, as the name might suggest. And this is the one. This is the song that sold this game to me. I watched that preview video and I heard this song and I immediately thought, all right, I want to play that game. And then, waited 7 years to do so. But, it takes time. This is probably the most famous song on the soundtrack by far. But honestly, I don't think it's the most heard, if that makes sense. And it might not yet, but it will in a second when I explain more. But this song is awesome. And if you've never heard the symphonic version of this song, oh, it's so good.
Oh man, I can only imagine.
It's so good. But for the most heard song in ActRaiser, we actually have to go to critical track number 2, Birth of the People. This is a very simple, classical sounding piece that just manages to lodge itself in your head easily. It plays during simulation sequences, so while you're doing all your city building and all that, this is the song you're hearing in the background. And I think if you, with no experience of ActRaiser, you listener, have ever heard any song from this game at any point, it was probably this one, because I hear it used in the background of video essays all the time.
I feel like more than half of our listeners just had an epiphany of, this is that song and it's from this game? Yeah, like all the time. Ba ba da da ba 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 da. Like, yes, it's everywhere.
Yeah. This is by far, while I don't think it's as good as Fillmore, and I don't think it's as quote-unquote famous as Fillmore, this is the one you've probably heard at some point and just not realized that you'd heard it before. It's uncanny, that experience, and if any song is going to give you that experience, it's this one. But then, we've got to ramp up the intensity. With critical track number 3, The Beast appears. This is the boss fight theme. I believe specifically this is the boss fight theme for the first action sequence of a land. I believe the second one, where you're actually fighting one of Tanzra's lieutenants, is a different song. And this is just this intense and bombastic piece. It just sounds epic. Like you're having a fight of biblical proportions, and Koshiro is determined to make you feel like it. And he succeeds 100%. This song's great.
Yeah, really powerful energy here. And again, yeah, SNES soundtracks, like at a time where it was before, the legendary Final Fantasy soundtracks and all that on the SNES. Yeah, this is a good one.
And then track number 4 is actually my favorite song on the soundtrack. Fillmore might be the most famous. Birth of the People might be the most recognizable. But for my personal favorite, it's critical track number 4, Sacrifices. This plays, I don't remember which town it would be specifically, which land, but at one point, one of your lands invents music, and then Birth of the People changes to this. And it's just sort of this really impactful moment somehow, despite being this really little thing, and all it does is change the music, and that's it. Just this hauntingly beautiful piece that honestly comes out of nowhere. And it's kind of just stuck with me ever since I played. And the orchestrated version of this song as well is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, of all the songs in the game, I think this is the one that has stuck with me the hardest.
Yeah, shouts out to the waltz-like 3/4 time signature, because you don't hear it too often in games, but when it's ba 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 ba, yeah, you're definitely getting that different feel as opposed to the 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, good stuff.
And I've said it in the past, I like me a waltz. Waltzes are good. I think I said that during the Skullgirls episode.
yeah.
Why do I remember that? Anyways, our last critical track, number 5, all over the world. This plays during the second action sequence in the land of North Wall, which is near the end of the game. In fact, for most people, this is going to be like the last regular action sequence they play before the final level. A lot of YouTube comments like to compare this song to Star Wars. And you know what?
Yeah.
I can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can't hear anything else. I just hear Star Wars now.
Or at least something trying to riff off a Star Wars soundtrack in its style, for sure.
I would not be surprised if that was one of the inspirations for this song in general. But at this stage, I remember being extremely hard. Just, in general, all of the platforming sections are very, very hard. But, yeah. This is like a tree. You're like climbing a tree or something. It's weird. So cutting room floor. Let's get into it. I got two. First is Sky Palace. And I'm mainly bringing this song up because you hear it a lot in game. This plays when, as the name might suggest, you are in the Sky Palace, choosing whether or not to move the Sky Palace or whether or not to begin an action sequence. And it has like a really commanding power to it with the organ and such. It feels very godly, but nothing really notable past that, I think.
Very powerful chords, though, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then I have the one that was actually like seconds away from being on my Critical 5, Bloodpool Cassandora. This song is just right in your face, right in the start. It feels hectic, feels evil, and feels perfect for a place called Bloodpool.
I get a really big Chrono Trigger vibe from it.
I could hear that, yeah. No, I hear that. 100%. You are correct to get that vibe, I think. So what will I never forget about ActRaiser? I mean, it's the soundtrack. 100%. It's, again, one of the biggest examples of a soundtrack selling a game to me. I think I sat down and played it for a whole morning. I wrote a review on the old SMYN forums at one point and posted it. And that was the first time I'd ever written a review of anything.
I remember that, yeah.
I don't know. It's a good game, but again, I'm not entirely sure I'd ever go back to it. I can't say that I've had a fire to go replay it. I played it once, and that's plenty. But, yeah, I would play a new ActRaiser if they brought back the city building aspect. Because if they just made a straight platformer again, I don't have any interest. I don't care. So, for our transition, we like to highlight a fan remix or cover from YouTube or OC Remix or what have you. And, of course, it was going to be a Fillmore remix. What else was I going to grab? I'd be crazy to go look for anything else. And this one comes from Game Metal, who has done our transition before. I don't remember what game it would have been, but I know I've used one of their songs as a transition before. But yeah, it's a metal cover of Fillmore. It's super cool. Please enjoy that. We will be right back.
Okay, so from 1991 all the way to 2018, we are going to talk about Tetris Effect. Yeah, kind of tapping into that higher power a little bit here, because Tetris Effect is no mere Tetris game.
Boy, is it not.
You're right. I mean, everyone knows Tetris, though, right? I mean, it's that original 1984 game that was developed by software engineer Alexei Pajitnov. And this was for the Soviet-Russian Electronica 60 system. But it saw its biggest success worldwide, certainly at least stateside, in 1989 on Nintendo's Game Boy system. Now, we also have to mention, on one hand, we have Tetris, but on the other hand, we have a man named Tetsuya Mizuguchi. And Tetsuya Mizuguchi is known for creating video games that incorporate an emphasis on like this interactive sound design. Like there's games, but there's also music that is dynamic and interactive in some capacity. So these are games like Rez, like Lumines, and Child of Eden. So this project, Tetris Effect, is a mashup of Tetris with the game design of Mizuguchi. And Tetris Effect was released worldwide exclusively for PlayStation 4 on November 9th, 2018 with PlayStation VR support. You could play either without VR or with VR. A PC version with support for Oculus Rift and HTC Vive was released July 23rd, 2019, so almost a year later. It's developed by Monstars and Resonair, and these are Japanese companies, not the aliens in Space Jam.
I was so close to making that joke.
And this is published by Enhance Games, which is the one of the studios that Mizuguchi now founded, works for, I think. So it's a Mizuguchi joint, if you will. So Tetris Effect. It's a puzzle game. And so the basics of Tetris being you have these tetrominoes, which are these shapes that are made out of 4 equally sized squares. Now there are 6 different kinds of tetrominoes, and they fall one at a time from the top of the screen to the bottom. Players can rotate these different shapes for them to fit just perfectly so in order to create these perfectly filled horizontal lines. And when one of those little squares out of the 4 for a tetramino, when it makes up this perfectly horizontal line with no breaks in them, that's a line clear, and so the line disappears and the structure collapses. How is the game different, though, compared to regular Tetris? Because I feel like I shouldn't have had to explain what Tetris is, but, just in case.
You never know.
Tetris Effect is different in the sense that it has this dynamic electronic music soundtrack that plays throughout the game, especially during these 27 levels of the single-player campaign mode known as The Journey. During these levels, players can also fill up a meter by these different line clears and doing well at Tetris. You can then press a button to enter a suspended zone state where, the meter will slowly run out and players can clear as many lines as possible, depending on how high the blocks are all stacked up. You can clear up to 22 lines at once. And this is really done for increased scoring because Tetris at its core is like a high score kind of game. But when it comes to the plot of Tetris Effect and its campaign, there is no story to this game. It's honestly a game that's all about playing Tetris and clearing lines of these tetrominoes and just getting into this zone with Tetris while you're experiencing this music and these visuals that each level has a theme that's nature or something about humanity. It's just experiencing Tetris in this kind of ethereal way. That being said, what are our experiences with Tetris Effect?
So I have played it. I own it. I hit one level of the journey that just destroyed me. I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I am not good at planning ahead and or not good at working with high speeds when it comes to Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
And this specific level was one of the first moments where it was like, all right, we're running at speed 10 now, go. And every time it hit that, my brain was just like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, there are some nasty difficulty spikes in this game.
Mm-hmm. But everything I have played is absolutely incredible. You were talking about how there's no plot. It's just about playing Tetris. This game's more about it's about the experience, not so much the game almost. Which is weird for a game that I just said kicked my ass into next week to the point where I could not go further. One day I will try to go back because I want to see more. I really, really do. But yeah, I've played it. It hurt me. I like it.
So I totally understand your struggles because I was right there too. Obviously, Tetris, when you grow up playing video games, Tetris is a game that's it's very easy to grasp the concept of it. But unless you actively play it, you'll play it, but you won't be very good. Especially at the level that even on beginner, this game expects you to be at least good at Tetris. So when I got a PlayStation VR Christmas of 2018, this was one of the games that I knew I had to get with it. It was one of the games people loved talking about in 2018. And so, but I'm going into it I'm familiar with Tetris. Obviously, I'm familiar with Tetris, but it's not a game I've spent any time playing actively, learning the different strategies involved to succeed at Tetris. And so I learned the hard way. And I don't often play games for the difficulty or the sense of accomplishment, but I got to a point, like you, multiple times where the difficulty spike was too much. And then I'd find myself on websites like freetetris.org or whatever, just in your spare time, get good at learning the patterns and what can be done with these different falling tetrominoes. And so I'd go back and I'd have the breakthrough, which feels so good. I got to the point where I beat the journey on beginner, but for a beginner for Tetris like me, I feel like that was a really big accomplishment.
I mean, I can't imagine getting that far.
It honestly just takes a lot of practice. That's all I can recommend. And good thing that, stressful moments aside, it's such a euphoric game to play. It's so relaxing. It's just wonderful. Obviously, the name Tetris Effect is inspired by the phenomenon of the same name, where it's studied that after players played the original Tetris or just the game of Tetris for a long period of time, players could continue to see falling tetrominoes, falling Tetris blocks for quite some time after stopping playing the game. So it's this idea, and the reveal trailer at E3 2018 is so good that it hits on this perfectly, and it's a guy talking about the phenomenon. A great reveal trailer, by the way. I remember seeing that as in the pre-show of Sony's E3 2018 press conference, and I was just like, oh, I don't even play Tetris, but I think I was coming off of just playing Res Infinite for the first time. And so I was becoming familiar with Mizuguchi's work, and I'm like, a game like Res from the Res creator with Tetris, yeah, I'll give that a go. Absolutely. So really, really interesting. Also interesting to learn that Mizuguchi had wanted to make this kind of game for a long time, like Tetris with his music stylings. But apparently, EA held the license to Tetris for a long time, and they were making it difficult to use. So, during this time, Mizuguchi made Luminous as a puzzle game with music instead. But in 2012, Mizuguchi began speaking with Hank Rogers, who was the founder of the Tetris Company, who now owns the right to Tetris. So they agreed to make this game, especially with the idea of players getting into what's called in game design a flow state. You could call it getting in the zone, basically where, playing the game becomes so natural that you zone out, you kind of have like the music wash over you, and you just kind of get into this trance state. The flow state is definitely something that gets brought up in studies about games and playing, and how time can just get lost very quickly because you're locked in. So this was the goal with this game. Specifically, according to Mizuguchi, the goal was to amplify and enhance that same magical feeling where you just can't get it out of your head. And it's not just the falling shapes, but all the visuals, the sounds, the music. And I do believe that this is especially impactful in virtual reality. With PlayStation VR, I would imagine the same would be with Steam VR, whether it's Oculus Rift, HTC Vive. Now, VR is not required.
I've certainly never played it with VR.
I have a little bit. It's fine. I'd say you gotta play this, game with music. If you play this game muted, you're totally
a fool.
Missing out. you're just a fool. But VR definitely enhances the experience, enhances that zone and flow state, especially when you consider like the 3D light visuals that are around the Tetris playing field. Like when you kind of have that also wash over you along with the headphones playing the music, you also have the controller rumbling in time with the beat of the music. It just enhances that overall experience, and it's so good. Again, like you could be like me and be a total beginner at actually playing and becoming good at Tetris. I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, I'm great. Like I became good enough to beat this on beginner, which is not easy, especially with the rate that blocks fall at the end. Like you have to be good at looking at what's coming up next while you're getting the current block in position. Like it's a must, especially, as you certainly know, Joe.
Oh yeah. The first time I played this game, actually, Men was the one that bought it first, and I walked out into the living room and he had his big headphones on, stretching all the way across the living room to his PS4, or he had them plugged into the TV, not into the PS4. And just lights off, playing on the big screen. And then he made me do that, with, one of your songs on the Critical 5. And that was the best possible introduction to that game I could have had. And I would like to try it in VR, but I don't own any VR.
I actually had, again, one of the songs, the first level of the game. That's how I introduced my girlfriend to VR. Granted, it would have helped a lot better if I had put the visor on a while. I didn't have it fully on, like it wasn't perfectly in focus. That's my bad. But this game is a great way to just, even if you do the playing, just to have someone in that zone, even without the interactivity, just to experience what virtual reality can be like for the first time. I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
So the game was reviewed very well, with a Metacritic of 89, best described as a love letter to Tetris. I think, if anything, reviewers kind of jabbed at it for a lack of multiplayer, seeing it as a missed opportunity. But then again, it really is a single player adventure experience. So that's that. If you want multiplayer, that's what Tetris 99 is all about. Honestly, you'll get your fix there if you want that.
There's no shortage of multiplayer Tetris games.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is one that's specifically meant for the single player zone out relax experience. It was Giant Bomb's and Eurogamer's Game of the Year for 2018, or Best Game of the Year. Its soundtrack was nominated for its music at the DICE Awards, the GDC Awards, the BAFTAs, the Gang Awards. So like these different big video game awards. Oddly enough, not the Game Awards. Come on, Jeff Keighley.
Yeah, I do remember being kind of upset about that, honestly.
Yeah, that's kind of a misstep there, I think. But its soundtrack won at the South by Southwest and the New York Gaming Awards. Its legacy, it's Tetris. Like Tetris has an extending legacy. I mean, like I mentioned Tetris 99, but there isn't that much. Like there's not like a sequel plan for Tetris Effect. I think it's just a very isolated, unique experience that if you have VR, a VR system, like get this game. I don't care if you're not good at Tetris. I wasn't good at Tetris, but I knew like this is something you have to have just for that ethereal relaxation. Let's talk about the music though, and we talk about the music with the composer for this game, and that's Noboru Mutoh. Noboru Mutoh, not much information on the man, honestly, but he is part of the group Hydelic with Takako Ishida, and Hydelic is usually credited as the ones who composed the music for this game. But Noboru Mutoh is kind of one of like the front names of that. So we're talking about him specifically. He's also part of the group Metal Mouse with Yukitoshi Kihana. So he's just part of different electronic music groups here and there. No information on when he's born, where he was born, even his childhood. Taking from his website, the About section, here's a quote. It says, "I started to learn the piano in my childhood, and that was the beginning of my interest in composing. The first time I heard the sound of a drum machine, I was overcome with intense emotions. It was from this moment that I became interested in dance music. The first time I heard the Chemical Brothers' album, Exit Planet Dust, I experienced the feeling of pure bliss. My mind had been awoken. I got into their music, and I was very interested in techno." So it's not surprising then that this music is very electronic, very driven by a strong bass beat. So it becomes very clear that it's like, oh yeah, this is his kind of work, at least. Also something on his About page that made me laugh a little bit. It said, quote, "There was an offer to compose for Cyndi Lauper. It made me intensely excited. However, it didn't realize."
Oh.
So, of all the people to possibly work for, Cyndi Lauper. But he's done remix work for Genki Rockets, which is actually a band founded by Tetsuya Mizuguchi. Also some remix work for Steve Aoki, Dragonet, and others. When it comes to what he's worked on, it seems to be a couple games, and that's Tetris Effect and also Res Infinite. And so Hydelic is credited on these. So when either you're seeing Hydelic or Noboru Mutoh, like this is him, like working with Mizuguchi on these kind of games more recently. So yes, it is Mutoh and Hydelic credited with compositions, but also credited vocal performances to Mehi Pieretti, Kate Brady, and Alina Renee. So those are like the credits on the game. When the credits roll, there's only certain songs that get distinct credits, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the Critical 5, why some vocalists are credited and some aren't really, but we'll see. The point is, this soundtrack, I did mention that it's a dynamic soundtrack. There are dynamic songs. And while these songs were originally created as full original compositions, they are adjusted after the fact into 3 stages that increase their intensity or the number of instruments used over time. And this is because of how the single-player campaign mode, the journey, is set up. See, for most of the 27 levels, for one level, the goal for the player is to clear 30 lines. So after 10 lines are cleared, the music shifts into its second stage. And after 20 lines, the music shifts again into its third stage. And so like what starts and seems pretty basic as you begin to clear lines for the level, by the end becomes just this full experience with everything going and all of the instruments going. But I must also note that it's dynamic in another way. See, the moments when the blocks are set in place, whether the player is letting them drop slowly, whether they are soft dropping them to accelerate the rate at which they fall, or if you do something called a hard drop, where at the push of a button, it just snaps down to the bottom of the screen. That's
usually up is the button for that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So whether it's soft or hard drop, the moment when these blocks lock in place at the bottom of the screen creates an audio hit in the soundtrack. And that can be a certain instrument plays, and depending on the time it plays in the song, it could be at a certain pitch. So the act of playing the game creates these different audio effects and hits and impacts that the player is creating directly with their style of play.
And it's seriously super cool.
It's fantastic. I mean, if it's giving you chills right now, just imagine playing it. Because honestly, it creates for just a unique experience every time. It's going to be the same music, at least for the backing track, but your play is adding these little melodic hits. So levels as a whole, they start as apparently concept art and just a written description of the overall theme. When it came to Noboru Mutoh and Hydaelek, they were, create the music based off of that, but then there's further tweaks that can be made to the level, and then the music can be tweaked as well with some collaboration there. Even the visuals can be tweaked a little bit. Maybe the color changes a little bit, just for a greater sense of synesthesia and the idea of like, how do you visualize sound is essentially what that means. Like when you hear something, can you see a certain color? What color is that? Because the themes of these different levels varied so much, the genres also varied as well on the Tetris Effect soundtrack. Mostly all based in electronic music, but the sounds overall range greatly, and we'll get to some of those different styles. In an interview, Hydaelek was asked that if they had to work on a sequel or they wanted to try something differently, they said that they would, quote, like to try creating music that's constructed differently each time you play the game. So I would think it'd be like taking that dynamic level just to the next step, essentially. So you're wondering, I mean, gosh, what does this music sound like? And granted, our samples don't have the user interacted hits and whatnot, but I'm mostly going to be taking like the sound from the back end when it's like you're on lines 20 to 30 here. So just to give you the sense of that full sound. So just to keep that in mind, let's get to the 5 critical tracks, and we'll start with that first level, Connected, Yours Forever. So yes, this comes from the first level, which is the Deep, and this just might as well be the main theme of the game. It's the one we're talking about, like, you gotta show people this level, this song. It's magical.
So this is obviously the level that I was shown by my roommate. And I think this is the most memorable part of the game. Not to say that the rest of the game isn't like also super memorable, but this is the moment that just without a doubt, now you know what game you are playing. You know what this game's all about. Let's do it. The mana rays swimming around, like the ones made of light swimming around. It's so cool to like play in the dark.
Oh yeah, it's just a special experience. Vocals are by Kate Brady, who is apparently someone that the team wanted to collaborate with for a long time. So I'm glad they got to do so. But it was also interesting to read about the process of this song in particular. Apparently, like, there were 10 different tracks that were written for this song, or like 10 different iterations, because like this was the level that was all about like finessing what the concept of this game was through a lot of trial and error. And, you know, with people playing this level in the studio just to test and make sure this was working all right, like they knew they had to nail this one. And they totally did. Apparently adding vocals was one of the last steps because it was originally just ambient music. But just right from the beginning, like you just get this sense of like the 1, 2, 3, 4, like the heavy 4 hit on the beat is just, and it keeps like alternating what the heavy hit sound is. It's so good. The vocals just add a whole other quality to it. Such a special song. Had to start with it.
It is my favorite song in the game by far. Yeah, it's really good.
Number 2 on the Critical 5 is Flames. So this is the 7th level called Ritual Passion. It's the end of block 2. Because in the journey, like you go through different blocks of like 3, 4, sometimes 5 levels. And so you're supposed to play them all back to back, continuing your progress from one to the next. And you know, once you're clear of a block, like, yay, you did it, you get a score, on to the next block. So sometimes the end of blocks are the most difficult ones. And here's your first difficulty spike in the game.
I believe I was able to make it past this. I actually don't remember the exact name of the one I got stuck at. I'm not sure this was the one, though, because I've heard the next one.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'd have to go pull up the game again to check, which obviously I can't do right now. But, like, I remember this song vaguely. It's super good. I think you're right. I think that might be Hindi.
Yeah. So it's a different language there in the vocals, at least in the clip that we're sampling here. But yeah, the vocals aren't credited. So I wonder if like it's taken from something. Yeah, I'm guessing it may be Hindi.
Maybe.
Yeah, definitely this tribal drum feel. And for me, at least when I played, there were 3 difficulty spikes that really halted my progress, and I just had to get better at Tetris as a whole. And so this was one of them. So I remember the song very well. It's just very good. Number 3 on the Critical 5, though, I think is my favorite on the soundtrack. And this is City Lights. This is the 10th level of the game, and it's called Downtown Jazz. I think when I saw the reveal trailer, I was like, oh yeah, I really should get this game. But then, you know, time passed, and I didn't have a VR system yet, right? But when I saw a video on Twitter that played this level, And it really exemplified early on in the level of just the control that the player has with the dropping of the blocks and creating these piano hits. And just like the scat jazz that kind of creates. And me being just, I love jazz, like a whole lot. Yeah, and then how it builds. I think it was that video that sold me like, oh, no. When I do get a VR system, like, this is a must. Like, I need to experience this with control and this level of a dynamic soundtrack. So yeah, the piano and the chords and just everything about this is just so special. And it just sounds so cool. I think it's one of the most dynamic levels as far as player interaction and contribution in the game.
This would definitely be my second favorite song in the game, just among this Critical 5 at the very least. Because I do know that your next one, I had never heard. I didn't get that far.
Oh, see, because if the fires of Ritual Passion and Flames did not break you, this one absolutely would have. Number 4 on the Critical 5 is All Nations. So this is the 16th level of the game. And yeah, you're making good progress once you cleared the fires. And then this drop happens when you clear your 20th line and you're shifting into that third and final block of the level. I'll tell you, like, that is when it kicks up to, again, another level that you have never seen the blocks fall. And it's where you had to really, really learn about looking at what's next and anticipating. But the sound of this bass drop, please, like, listen to this podcast episode, this song on its own with really good headphones that give you a good sense of bass, because it's there and it's intense and it's really cool. Yes, this is the Celebration level. Just it's another speed check, and it'll get you. It's powerful.
This reminds me of Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Oh, okay.
A little bit. The instrumentation is what does it, and also the drop. But I feel like there's also some other game we've talked about that this also kind of reminds me of. And I'm not 100% on what that would be.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, like it's a song that, like, when building up to it, there's like these vocals like sort of like hits in there. It's like it's catchy. I definitely found myself like playing some free online Tetris while these songs played in the background. It's not the same experience, but like just kind of getting ready for this episode. It's just like, yeah, I need to kind of feel that a little bit again. I honestly might go play Tetris Effect after this, to be honest, in VR. Like I'm super tempted just talking about it here.
If I didn't have a Dragon Ball Z game to go play,
I
probably also would maybe go load it back up.
Kakarot! Let's get to the 5th and final track on the Critical 5 here. This is Always Been, But Never Dreamed. Come follow me. This is the 27th and final level of the Journey campaign mode. Vocals once again by Kate Brady. Yes, this is the Metamorphosis. level. And it's in a final block all its own, because, each level you had 30 lines to clear. No, this one, you have to clear 90 to beat this. And each block of transitioning, the dynamic, bass of the song from one to the next, it takes 30 blocks just to do that. So this is a long level, a long stamina battle. And in that last section, those last 30 lines that you have to clear to beat the block, to beat the game, it's at the fastest speed that the difficulty allows. So it's like your skills are really put to the test. I think it's speed 10 on beginner. It's speed 20, the fastest on the highest difficulty. But it's the fastest speed, honestly. And to keep it up for the length of an entire level is so taxing. And when you're not expecting it, you're going through like 3-4 minutes of the build up, clearing those first 60 lines. And then you're hit with the hardest task you have. It's so difficult, but it feels so rewarding to clear. And I know I saved Twitter video. Like I had to use the share button. I'm like, I got to preserve this. Like I did this.
Make sure the world knows.
I beat beginner Tetris Effect. Yeah.
I mean, I can't. You say 90 lines at the fastest speed, and I'm just like, oh, my brain can't fathom doing that.
No, it's 30 lines at the fastest
30 lines,
speed. But you can fail, so quickly if you're not ready for it, that the 60 lines before it are just gone, wasted. You lose.
Oh boy. Yeah, no, even that just not happening.
But then it's a good thing that this song is so good. It's Kate Brady's vocals again to bookend the experience. And yeah, you'll get the song stuck in your head a lot with multiple playthroughs. So what do I have on the cutting room floor? A couple songs that really stuck out to me that I wish I could have put there, but I'm pretty confident with that critical 5 there. But one of them here is Next Chapter.
Close your eyes so you see my vision. Unite the soul so there's no division. Look into the future, we see all seasons. Aiming for the top, but what's the reason? Hands to the sky, realize we're free. We become the legends we were meant to be. Now open your...
This is for the second level Pharaoh's Code. And so when it's the level right after The Deep with Connected, Yours Forever, to have another, follow-up vocals piece, like just a vocal followed by another vocal song, like it makes it really memorable. But oddly enough, the vocalist is not credited here. So it's not any of the 3 credited vocalists because they're all women. And this guy obviously isn't. But I see sometimes comparisons to like early Linkin Park, maybe a little bit, and some Mike Shinoda. I'm like, yeah, maybe. But even still, like it's super catchy to get a little bit of rapping, a little bit, some flow lyrics in there. So I definitely remember this one well. And the other one is You and I. This one is from the 9th level, Dolphin Surf. So it's the level before Downtown Jazz with City Lights. And this is just another one where it's like another good drop, especially in that last 10 line block. Memorable visuals with these dolphins kind of swimming by you, and just a good vibe, good beat. Like, yeah, you really get in, especially when the controller is vibrating to the beat there. It's just Such a good experience, this game. What will I never forget about it? Yeah, it's the accomplishment, honestly. It's not the reason I play games, but I felt this game was special enough to try because it just feels so good playing Tetris Effect. Yeah, is it not the same when you're, not in VR? Like, you still get the same vibe. If you have like good speakers, it's still excellent, but you gotta have it in the cans, so to speak, in those headphones, reverberating through you. Just kind of takes it to a whole other next level.
So, in my case, while you were doing that, I started scrubbing through a Tetris Effect long play so I could find where I stopped. I made it way farther than I thought I did.
Oh.
I'm going to send you, this is the timestamp to how far I made it. This is the level that killed me. I don't know what the name is. I don't know if you do. Because this doesn't show the names before it starts the levels, but this is specifically the one. This is by far 100%. This is the one.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't remember offhand what is this one, but yeah, it's another tribal one.
Yeah.
It's not fire per se.
I think is it Hula Soul?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's as far as I got. So I was in area 5.
Okay, and the last bit of that one, that's one of the few levels for what it's worth that gets to 10. So
Yeah.
like you hit the fastest speed on beginner. But imagine that for 30 lines after you've gone through minutes leading up to it. Like that's what Metamorphosis, the last level, is all about. Like it's tough.
So yeah, that's what I'll never forget. That level destroyed me.
But with enough practice, I know you can get there. Anyone out there can get there. And it's just, games about godliness, just an ethereal plane, reaching a zone, whether you're doing action platforming or making decisions for people or just placing blocks in place. I don't know. It's great soundtracks. Definitely. I'm glad we got to talk about these ones for sure. But that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at The Debaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. But honestly, that MP3 podcast feed on podcast services around the globe, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, bring us with you on a run in your car, at work, and we won't tell your boss to listen to conversations about great game soundtracks. We are also on Spotify, not only the podcast, but also a big, big playlist of when we talk about tracks from video games and they're on Spotify, we'll add it to that big playlist. But are there any that are going to be added from this week's games?
Nothing this week. No ActRaiser, no Tetris Effect. Kind of surprised about Tetris Effect, actually. But we have added some from previous games, because since the last time we recorded, Yakuza 0 through 5 ended up on Spotify. So Yakuza 0 and then 2 songs from Yakuza 2 have been added to the playlist. And then all of Nier Automata was added to Spotify. So I put the Critical 5 and Cutting Room Floor tracks of that soundtrack on the playlist as well. So
great additions there. Absolutely. And when you're done listening, come find us on social media at Soundchat OST, and you can leave feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? But also suggestions for games that you'd like us to cover on the show. We'll get to those bonus tracks. We've got another developer or composer interview rather to spit out. And then we also have our best of 2018 list that we are currently working on, hoping to get those rolling out over time as well. Joe, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are talking about the game that, honestly, from the sound of it, got both of us into video game music in the first place, Super Smash Bros. Brawl.
It is our 1-year anniversary for the show, and I don't think we could talk about a better game. It'll be an interesting combination, a top 10 merged between our own individual top 10s, I think you'll be very happy with the results. We'll talk about one game next week. I think we'll like to do that on year anniversaries. We'll talk about Smash Brothers soundtracks because they're just an amalgamation of Nintendo original songs and remixes. But to play us out, I'd like to bring up Adam Havoc and Tiffany Shirts. They did a cover of Connected, Yours Forever, that is based on one of the ending credits songs of the game, where it's like an extended version. So the vocals may sound a little different, but that's taken from a different version of the song. You'll hear what I mean. Check out this wonderful YouTube cover. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.
With every passing day, the winds might grow stronger and carry us away.